So,
Okay, so good morning, good evening, whatever it is for all of you. My name is Yoram Lubjaniker. I'm the host of this meeting, and we're having a seminar on exhibiting picture postcards. So picture postcard, of course, has been a very important collectible for many, many years. And it's recently been introduced into philatelic exhibitions worldwide. And it's a new thing, so we're still adapting to it. We still don't fully understand how to do it properly. And this is why we're very keen on having this seminar to improve our understanding of how picture postcards should be exhibited. And I told him beforehand that some of the participants here are philatelists, some are picture postcard collectors, and some of these collectors are not really familiar with the way philatelists do exhibitions and the rules for scoring and so on. So that is in terms of general introduction. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Tim Bartschys. Tim has been a philatelist since he's been a small child. He's focusing on the Boer republics, Orange Free State and Transvaal. He's been exhibiting since 1997, and since then he's built, believe it or not, about 30 or more exhibits, different exhibits, absolutely amazing. And is not only about quantity, but also about quality, because he's won large gold in London 2010. He's a highly experienced national US judge. He's been very active in the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors. He's been involved with picture postcards since 2002, and he has an exhibit called A Visitor's Guide to Bloemfontein. And I'm sure we're going to see some highlights from this in his presentation today. And that exhibition has won gold medals many times. And Tim is also responsible for the introduction of picture postcard class in North America, one of the major players in that field. And Tim is also very experienced in giving presentations and has given many seminars on most of the exhibiting classes in philately and on picture postcards in particular. So we have really all the reasons to believe we're going to have a great seminar today. And at this point, I'll allow Tim to proceed. So go ahead, Tim.
Okay, thank you all for attending this thing they call Zoom. If it wasn't for COVID, I don't know that anybody would even know what Zoom is. With that being said, as Yoram said, picture postcards have been collected ever since they first started being created in the late 19th century. And they were created for one purpose, and that's to communicate both verbally, of course, after they were allowed to be written on the backside, but to communicate also visually. It's something I am here, look at where I am. So they're directly related to philately, even though I've been told when I was pushing this back in the early aughts, what are we going to exhibit next? Matchbook covers, license plates, what? What are these picture postcards saying? So in any event, I was first introduced to picture postcards when I judged at Port Elizabeth in South Africa in 2002. And it turns out that the Southern Hemisphere was far advanced in picture postcards. New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa both had been exhibiting picture postcards for some time. And the late, great David Crocker, who was head of the jury, said, Tim, why don't you be lead on judging picture postcards? I said, what? Can you at least give me some guidelines? So that was my introduction and baptism by fire of looking at picture postcards. And I took it home back to the US, and I presented it to our national committee for exhibitions and judging. And after some cajoling and crying and gnashing of teeth, we got a 3-year experimental try at exhibiting and judging picture postcards. And lo and behold, it was accepted and North America went on board. And we kind of used some of the things that were from the Southern Hemisphere, and Europe has come on board. In fact, I'll put a small plug in here for Seija Laakso from Finland. She is a widely regarded and renowned expert on North Atlantic, 19th century North Atlantic mail, and she collects picture postcards, and she has actually written a book that I would highly recommend, collecting and exhibiting picture postcards, that was written, I think, in 2012. And she has been a big promoter in Northern Europe and Europe. And so it is something that's not going away as much as some of the more conservative exhibitors and philatelists might wish they would, but it is fun. We all collect them. Raise your hand if you don't, and I don't see any raised hands out there. Everybody collects them because they're all they're an auxiliary to what we collect and love. So, I mean, how are you going to get involved in Bloemfontein at the turn of the century, or when it became the Orange River Colony, unless you can see vignettes of the place at the time period that we're talking about? So anyway, that is a background. The next will be a small plug. The American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors. This is something I created about 6 or 7 years ago with some updates. But the AAPE is an international organization, and I call it basically the Union for Exhibitors, because we promote things that advance our interests, which is exhibiting as well as being judged. And we've improved standards for exhibiting, judging, and exhibitions over the last almost 20 years in North America, including Canada. We have a reciprocal agreement with Canada in the United States. And if you ever have any interest, go find us on the web. And in fact, we probably have about 150 exhibits online that you can look and see the good, bad, and the ugly, including even some of my bad and ugly things. Okay, what are picture postcards? Generally speaking, they're any mailable item with a picture or a design or something that is illustrative that can be printed on a card. It was meant to be put through the post, and for those of you from South Africa, they were very early on in the thing, particularly people like Salo Epstein started producing cards clear back in the mid 90s. And for clarity, picture postcards kind of exclude printed to private order or stamped to order pictures, and I'll show you an example of those. But Salo Epstein had taken cards that were printed by the South African Republic and then printed images on the other side. So these are truly picture postcards. They're not PTPO or STO cards. And this is an example. Here's an example of an Epstein card here. There's the indicia, the ZAR indicia. And Canada did the same thing back in the, well, this is Edward. So back in the early teens, and this was for the Canadian Railway. Now, government cards are stamped by the government and sold, obviously, hopefully as collectibles, so they don't have to mail them, but they're for the service of the customers of the Postal Service. And then they're, oops, okay, let's get going the right way. And then printed to private order cards. In this case, this is an Argentine card, and they were trying to promote tourism in Argentina. And when you think of Argentina, besides pampas and cowboys, you think of trout fishing. At least I do. It's one of my collections is salmon and salmonids and trout. So this is from my collection, and it's a printed to private order. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay, so exhibiting picture postcards. There are some aspects that you need to consider, just like really any exhibit. And for those of you who are not presently exhibitors, this is, hopefully I won't bury you in some of the technical aspects of exhibiting, but as in anything that we do when we're trying to show somebody our passion, you need to have a story, choose your material, tell the story using philatelic or other things, or as I used to say, stuff. And picture postcards are, if you talk to a serious philatelist, it's just stuff or pictures, or it is not philatelic, but you choose your subject, and in picture postcards, we'll discuss it. It's almost infinite on the number of subjects and aspects and things you can exhibit. You want to choose your story. Again, this is just like any other exhibit that you choose, whether it's postal history, thematics, Cinderellas, illustrated mail, revenues. You've got to choose your material that you're going to use to expand your subject and to tell your story. You're going to have to choose your write-up, because a write-up is integral in displaying your knowledge of the material and the subject you're exhibiting. And then you choose your page layout. You want people to want to look at your material. So if it's pretty ugly, they'll walk right on by it. Okay, choosing your subject. The title becomes very, very important. And your subject becomes very important. And as I said, there are so many varieties of subject types. If you're a thematicist, pardon me if I use the word topical, but topical, you choose a topic and you put together a series of postcards which develop the topic that you're trying to choose. And whether it could be butterflies, it could be, there was an exhibitor here in the US that did an exhibit called Buzz, and it was all about mosquitoes. And it was quite clever and quite hilarious. Could be geographical or topographical. So geographical, that's my particular exhibit, tour of Bloemfontein. It can be historical. There have been exhibits here in the States, one on the Irish Revolution of 22 and 23. There are other historical exhibits that can be narrative, which there was an exhibit I judged in South Africa that was based upon a fictitious or made up train tour going up to Victoria Falls and the various sights and sounds that this individual saw. And then by class, it can be the artist, the photographer, the format, real picture photos, or unusual postcards like expanding, ones that you can view through. That's a class. Again, it's almost infinite, the number of things that you can come up with. So here's an example of topical, fishing, or exaggeration. I just caught one almost that size last Friday. I've got a picture to prove it. Then, or you can go do geographical. In this case, this was Owl Drugs, who was a major drugstore chain in the United States. A lot of collectors collect all sorts of owl drug things. Advertising or slogans. Here's Only You Can Prevent Forest Fires, presented by Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, if you care. By class, this is by an artist. Anybody who collects picture postcards from North America are very familiar with Winch, very, very famous and very beautiful artist, highly sought after. And also, or a publisher. This is published by Whitney. He had the publishing company had a very distinctive style, so you could do Whitney cards. Now, we get into one of the most contentious aspects of exhibiting, and it's called treatment. Treatment is just a fancy way of saying story. You chose your subject. Now, what are you going to do with it? you're going to choose a storyline. So one of the best ways, just like if you're writing a book or a novel or doing a treatise on something, you need an outline. And that's very important. And you need to think about, how am I going to start this? How am I going to end it? And think of it as a sandwich. I got 2 pieces of bread and I'm going to put something good in the middle. So that's the story. It should be logical. It should have a flow. It should be a cogent story. It should be something that if you threw all the pages up in the air and put them back in the frame, it would make a difference. That's kind of an example of treatment. And each page and each card relates to and advances a story. We'll get into that kind of in selection. Choose your material. You want to, so once you've got your subject, you've got your storyline, now you've got to choose the material you're going to put in there. As I said before, each item needs to move the story along. If it wasn't there, the story would suffer. If it's there, the story's not advanced, maybe it should stay home on the kitchen table. Shows the knowledge of your subject, that's implied knowledge. So if you choose a card that best shows a point of your story, that's what you want to use. Then choosing the best kind of material for rarity or challenge factor, Matt. This is, when you see challenge factor, for you, those of you who do not exhibit, do not read dollar signs. Challenge is just that. Some of the most difficult things that you can possibly get for your exhibit may only cost you $2 to $5, not $2,000 to $5,000. So don't think rarity as opposed to scarcity. Scarcity is supply and demand. Rarity is in numbers. And challenge has nothing to do with dollar signs. Best quality of material for your conditional aspects of your exhibit. So the write-up, this will show what you know about your subject. Discussion of the story. So as you write up your material, you develop the story of your subject. And it should be information generally not readily available to the public. So when you start showing the knowledge of your subject, make it interesting, not boring. The knowledge of cards, and this is the difference between picture postcards and virtually all other exhibits, where you show in thematics, you show knowledge of your subject, then you show philatelic knowledge. So you're using a philatelic item and you put an airmail cover that has all sorts of auxiliary markings. You're going to describe what the airmail rate was and what the auxiliary markings talk about. Well, in picture postcard exhibits, frankly, we don't care about the philatelic items on the card. There's exceptions to the rule, but in general, we don't care about the postmarks. We don't care about the postal rates. We care about the cards. So you substitute philatelic knowledge for deltiological knowledge. And that deltiology is the hobby of collecting postcards. So you display information over and above what's obvious, the publisher, the printer, what style of printing, and also you can use personal experience. And we'll get into this in a few seconds, but the amount of published information, unlike philatelic information, the amount of published deltiological information is very sparse. So you need to use your own personal experience. And sometimes if no information is available based upon your personal experience, you make estimates for like, when were they produced? Because you may not know. The only way you know is with a postmark on the back of the card. Then you choose your page layout. And you want to make people want to look at your exhibit. If it looks ugly, guess what the viewer is going to do? He's going to walk right on by. Is it balanced on the pages and in the frame? Does it look nice? Does it demand your attention? And you don't want it to look like it was done by a youth of 6 or 7 years old. In fact, you 6 or 7 years old probably could teach us something to do with layouts. And does it show creativity? And creativity in many aspects of picture postcards exhibiting are rewarded. They are rewarded in other kinds of exhibiting, but you can be creative in your presentation and layout and be rewarded. Exhibit valuation. Now, this is probably where we in North America may differ from the rest of the world. We have put picture postcards on the same footing as any other philatelic exhibit. So you're judged based upon treatment, importance, philatelic knowledge and personal study and research, rarity and condition, and presentation, just like any other exhibit. And that makes it very much easier to judge. At one point, North America, Canada and US, we had, I think, 15 or 17 different exhibit evaluation forms. And it was a nightmare, trust me. So challenges to exhibit. There's a larger range of themes and subjects than even open class exhibits, and social philately and display, what we call display in the US. References are much less than philatelic references. There's no established baseline for a storyline. It's like, which allows the exhibitor freedom to do what he wants to, but it puts the burden on the exhibitor to establish the treatment. Say you're doing a traditional exhibit about a stamp or about a stationery, a certain kind of postal stationery. The general storyline is pre-production, which is the design and the way that the item is printed, and then the stamp as issued, the stamp as used, and end of story. That's a standard treatment for a traditional exhibit. Well, it's like thematics, kind of. You can do more or less whatever you want to do, but it's up to you to make sure it tells a story. It's almost infinite. It's unorganized. It's chaos, disorganized chaos, can be. So treatment. One of the aspects of treatment is title page. And the title, you want to say in a short title, as well as the continuation on the title page, what it is, the scope, basically, how are you going to train your little pony within a corral? You need to have a corral that your exhibit's going to fit in. You got to develop the story. Does it have a beginning and an end? Are all the aspects of the subject well covered? And the limits, exhibit limits, are based upon subject or theme. It is not a collection. And very frequently, you will see, and picture postcards sometimes, and postal history sometimes, are collections and not exhibits. And that's a major difference. If you just say, this is what I've found, versus this is a story I'm trying to tell, and what I have fits in to develop this story. Okay, here's an example of the title page. This is a particular exhibitor wanted to talk about the Great Lakes passenger steamers of old. And this was his title page. Shows a picture postcard, where, this is the where. He talks about the when and the what and the how and the where and the why. Sometimes you put that on your title page. So this is very much like a thematic exhibit. He's developed the various sections that the story will develop, so you can follow the story on the title page. This is a fellow who has a thematic exhibit in this exhibition, is Phil Steger. This is his Royal Palm Tour, and this is a picture postcard exhibit that he did, probably 15 years ago. Here is an outstanding thematic exhibitor who went on the dark side and has done a handful of picture postcard exhibits. This happens to be my exhibit, my entry into picture postcards. And looks quite a bit different than other picture postcards, but you describe what it is I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I give you a background of what the story is. I show you a map of old Bloemfontein and where the major sources, where the major scenic places are, and then the plan and various how I do a deltiological data versus a subject data. Use different font. Okay, so the subject, explicit knowledge displayed by the write-up. Implicit is something that you, by the selection of your item, that implies knowledge of the subject. So that's the difference between implicit and explicit. Research should be evidence in your write-up, and the write-up should be brief enough to be understood easily, but gives you richness. So that's the argument between calligraphy versus novels. You want to keep it succinct that the person, when he reads the first sentence, he knows why that item is there. Other stuff that he reads in that write-up is not integral to the understanding of the story. It's just for your own edification. So here's a subject knowledge. This is a postcard, actually rather ratty looking, but these are rather uncommon cards produced by a guy named Lawrence. And I tell you about the president's residency. So I give you the background of it and what it was and when. Then here's another example. And this is getting around Bloemfontein. And one of the ways you can get around is by bicycle and by the research of a contemporaneous source of advertising. It's kind of, people would pay money to get included in this particular booklet. And in this case, it was F. Shaw, who was a bicycle shop owner right here in this area. And here's actual advertising circa 1910 that he did. And again, discussing what the view is, and by the printer, in this case, Salo Epstein. And then the cards, this is the implicit knowledge, is by the choice of cards made to flesh out the story. So even though it may not exactly go with what it is you're trying to show, the view helps move the story. And this is very much a thematic trick. I don't want to call it a trick. It's a thematic tool. Research is shown by write-up on the cards themselves. Publisher printer series, date issued, where possible. As I said before, the information available, published information is so scarce, it's amazing whenever you find it. There have been some people that have written about Southern Africa postcards, but again, it's kind of rare. And be succinct and direct, not stating the obvious. This card is color and it has, and go on and on. It just, that's pretty obvious. And postal history is not important because the focus is on the picture of the card. Now, if you're talking about a specific subject, and like I have some cards mailed from Salo Epstein to his clients, you may show that when talking about publishers, but you probably would not say it was a two cent rate and it was mailed by such and such to such and such, arriving here. The date it was mailed is only important about the contemporaneity of the card at a particular point in history. Now, deltiological knowledge, here's Barlow and Brothers, Bloemfontein. Again, I go through who the Barlow brothers were, and I even discuss a little bit about challenge factor. Then when you talk about card varieties, this is by the same printer, fairly contemporaneous within a couple of years of each other, same negative, but different printing. And this was a series of X number of 13 or 14 cards. He would put greetings from Bloemfontein. Sometimes they say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And what was printed on the back, and this is an undivided car, and this was by Borkenhagen, who was a major printer in Bloemfontein. When his company got bought out, the new owner said, who's this Borkenhagen guy? And he printed this blackout. So this is a variety. It shows individual research and personal study about the cards themselves that wouldn't be seen or known by the casual viewer. Okay, dates of use are not important unless they're associated with production. So these cards were produced based upon my collection from 1902 to 1905. Those are the dates I've got. So they were produced, put on sale at least in 1902. Card number are useful if related to a series or dates. So lots of times these printers had ranges of numbers that were used for a specific area or a specific purpose of the card design. Divided backs are only relevant, like in the case of South Africa, divided backs came in 1904. Other countries, it was later than that. Other countries, I don't think it was earlier than that, but other countries, it was later. So here's an example. GB and Company in Cape Town, they only produced cards for the Free State that showed Bloemfontein views. And the card numbers range from 658 to 98. So there's 41 different cards they issued. Bloemfontein. Okay, that's my own personal knowledge because I have that range of cards in my collection. This again goes into this was that card I showed you earlier, but it talks about what you can't see because we're not going to show you the backs. Okay, choice of subjects is limited, and available published references and printers and publishers is also very limited. Therefore, the challenge is in presenting both the subject knowledge and the deltiological knowledge. And that's where your own personal study comes in. So you are making statements based upon the exhibitor's experience, and judges, if they're nice, not always nice, but if they're nice, they will give the exhibitor benefit of the doubt as the person who has been collecting this stuff for 20, 30 years, knows the material that's out there, and therefore his analysis of such things as research and knowledge and personal study or rarity should be taken at face value. This is a very subjective evaluation, and you've got to help the judges because they probably won't know. Highlight of items will help, and that's one thing you can do, pointing fingers, flashing lights, or just simple highlighted statements. Survival versus numbers printed, who knows? From small little countries that nobody ever went to, what's the survival rate of a small hotel in some little burg in northern Transvaal? I don't know, but if you've got one, it's probably not very common. Personal observations by exhibitors are important. Speculation is a help. Rarity, things by rule of thumb you can talk about uncommon. That would be common. Those were probably printed by the tens of thousands. Interior views tend to be more scarce. Modern cards for condition, modern cards of chromes and lines should be free from faults. Used cards should be free from ink or cancel offsets that detract from the picture. Rare cards, and when I say rare cards, it's like possibly one off. I'll show you one. Can be accepted if necessary for development of the story. So if you've got something and you're trying to make a point, and I'll show you in a second, the judges are going to have to assume that, yeah, this is a nasty card, but find me a better one. Used divided back cards pre-1910 plus or minus may have some writing around the face because they weren't allowed to write on the back. It was only for the address. But here's an example. Privately printed, real photo, 2.5 months after the fire of the third Radstall in Bloemfontein. You see the onlookers are gawking at the fire, completely destroyed this building. It's the only one I've ever seen in over 30 years of collecting. And it's pretty ratty. Am I going to get penalized? If they want to take a point away from me for condition, that's fine. But this is hardly a conditional fault considering its importance, since this is in the discussion of the development of the Radstalf. What it was before and what it was afterwards, and in between, it burned down. Okay. Now, overlapping cards in North America is permitted if important aspects are not hidden. And these can include flaws or faults of the card, and also other things, but generally flaws. Layout and write-up, neat and pleasing to the eye. Creativity will be rewarded, as I said. And presentation should not distract from the cards. So this goes back to common sense. When computers, particularly with some of these nice programs, first came out, you wouldn't believe what got into the frames. I mean, colors and fancy fonts and blinking lights and pointing fingers and all sorts of weird stuff and multiple colors. Try and avoid that because the reason that you have a picture postcard exhibit is for the cards, not for your artistic sensibilities. But again, being creative is a good thing. Just don't distract from the cards. And they should stand out and encourage the viewers to look at them. Okay. Our class was taken, as I've said, we stole from the Southern Hemisphere. Thank you, South Africa and Australia. In fact, I actually got the GREVs and IREVs from Australia and took all that data as well as South Africa and devised our own scoring system, which eventually became FIP based. And I found this out personally when I exhibited in Australia. They were not amused at my overlapping of cards. In fact, they dinged me pretty heavily on that. Some countries do not put as much import on treatment as well as deltiological knowledge, because I've seen a lot of exhibits from overseas that did not focus on deltiological knowledge, or the treatment wasn't nearly as tightly woven as it could be. But you know, that was how they judged it over there. And when it came here, it got a little less than what they were used to, but that's, you know, what else is new? We're not all perfect. In fact, most of us, many of us are more imperfect than others. If you show your overseas, expect differences, which is not any different from any other class. It depends, thematic exhibits are going to be treated differently depending upon where they go, postal history, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an example. They did not like and neither did they like Phil's. This is Phil Steger's exhibit. So that kind of, well, we still got 15 minutes, but I'm out of things to show you. So anyway, I'll turn this over to Yoram, and he can kind of take it from here by opening up to questions if you'd like.
Yes. Well, thank you, Tim. Well, we do have some questions, and I know that for a fact because I have some questions which I've prepared in advance. Let's see now if I can. Let's see if I can get to share my screen. How do I do that?
You want me to put my screen back on?
No, I want to share my screen now.
Okay, good.
Your screen. Multiple. Okay, so let's see this. I have a few questions, and they are about the usage of material because I ran into some difficulties with that. And the first question is whether to use a postally used postcard versus mint one. And I've given here an example. These are two identical postcards. One is postally used, one is not. Both are, the card is undivided, so we have right up on the front. And to me, just by feeling, the one on the left-hand side is much better. I don't know, it adds to the experience of the viewer. My question is, will the judges appreciate the postally used card, or they will deduct points for condition because it was handled by man and has some, possibly stains and stuff like that from the ink?
I mean, personally, if they're the identical cards for condition, so you've made your selection to make your point in your exhibit, in your storyline, by choosing the proper card. I would say that for conditional reasons, you would choose the mint card. And unlike things such as a traditional exhibit where you're showing use of a particular stamp or in postal history, in this particular case, a condition would trump the selection aspect of it, because you're showing the same thing, just and since in picture postcards we don't really care about how it was used in the mail, but sometimes that's the only way you can find it. So it all depends upon the frequency of these particular items coming up.
But assuming there's no, I can get both. Let's say I can get both, and so on. You wouldn't give, certainly you wouldn't give extra points for the postally used card, even though, I don't know, for me personally, I'm thrilled when I see a postally used postcard like that. Just,
Yeah.
It just gives
Well,
me
that,
chill.
And I think you can see on an example of the three exhibits that you have, we all probably started out as stamp collectors, and then we became specialists, and then we became true philatelists. And for us, seeing the use of stamps on a postcard and a nice cancel or a rare cancel, that excites us, but that's philately, and that's not deltiological. So where in philatelic exhibits, that would be a bonus. In deltiology, since you're showing a postcard in the image, it being used or mint can only be negative because it might detract from the condition of the card. The picture has made its point, and the clearer and the cleaner the picture or the postcard, the better, the less distractions you have on the conditional aspect. But we're talking about, if every card in your exhibit was used, it probably wouldn't be noticed. If most of your cards are mint and then you've got some kind of grubby used ones, it will be noticed. But it's a point or two. But if Yvonne's shaking your head.
Because I would choose, no doubt about it, the left one with the writing, that it's make it more personal, even that the condition supposedly is less or is not as good as the ones that nobody used. I don't know. This is my way that I collect stuff. And because it's that I don't collect stamp, I collect postcard.
Right. And this is something I've said the entire 24 years that I've been judging. It's your exhibit, and you can do whatever you want. And if you have reasons that are logical and cogent and do not detract from the purpose and of the exhibit, then you should do whatever you want to. There was a fellow who collected Limburg, Charles Limburg, and his choice of paper was Robin Eggs blue with clouds. Judges hated it, absolutely hated it, but it was his personal choice. And I sometimes had trouble convincing the judges that it was creative, it was attractive, it was crowd pleasing, and it was what he wanted to do. And the material he showed was not truly detracted from it. So if you can make, well, like in your synopsis, if you can say the challenge factor of finding these postcards used is 10 times what it is for mint, it's the same thing in postal stationery, and Mike Smith will agree that when you get into stationery, certain time periods, mint stationery is a nickel a dozen. Finding it used is much more difficult. So for an individual that wants to show mint and used or likes mint because they're cleaner, well, it was meant to be used in the mail, like we talked about earlier. You can make that point if you're just looking strictly at the point system and how your exhibit is going to be judged, unless you make that point that I am doing this for a challenge factor, and the judges may not buy that. You know how judges are. They're an obstinate group of people. I can attest to that. You can do that. And I think you should do that. If that is your choice to do it, for gosh sakes, the reason we do this is for personal satisfaction and to share our material with other people. And we can also do it for the jury. And if the jury doesn't have a sense of humor, well, okay, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And again, what's it going to be? It's going to be a point or 2, 3 points maximum for condition if they're really having a bad day. So that's my opinion.
I think I have my answer here. So the next question, again, is about condition. Let's say I've taken this picture off the internet. It's a postcard that has a postmark on the front. The postmark is there, it's not very heavy, but to a certain extent, it detracts from the condition. Will I really lose points over condition for that one or for similar cards, or it's just, unimportant?
Well, again, I think it's the same situation. If that card is a challenge to find, and you make a statement, and if it's in the synopsis, that's an excellent place to put it, that virtually all used cards in the exhibit as displayed are there because of the challenge factor of finding a better one. This is the only card that I have seen. Right. Yeah, judges have to understand. I mean, it's like when you're doing a postal history exhibit. Sometimes the rarest rate in the world is one of the ugliest covers you've ever seen. But find me another one, and I'll put it in there. So it just all depends on the jury. Okay. It doesn't bother me anymore.
Fair enough.
Okay, one moment. I have a question. How you as a judge that can see, I don't know, 30, 40, 60 exhibit, how you know that this postcard is rare or it's not rare, if it was difficult to find it, how your knowledge come to be in those subjects? Personal question.
It is an extremely tough question. And that was one of the questions that was asked when we were first starting this. How are we going to know about rarity? We can't possibly know about rarity. I mean, there's how many millions, how many billions of cards were printed, and how many millions of various face different cards are there? Uncalculable. How are we supposed to know? And the comment I made under that is, you as the exhibitor, if you want to get rarity points, you have to tell the judge what is challenging, what is rare. And And there, as I said, there are rules of thumbs that you can go through. Interiors, close-ups tend to be more uncommon than panoramic views. Real photos, one-off real photos you can kind of recognize. After dealing with picture postcards for a while, you can kind of see that one's more challenging. There weren't that many printed of that style versus the linens or the chromes. If a judge cares, he's going to try and get himself to a point where he feels more comfortable. But as is even in postal history or traditional or any other exhibiting format, you have to try and educate the judge yourself. And finding a way of, it's a lot easier in postal history and traditional exhibits. One of three essays known. I mean, that you can hit in between there. You can't say that with picture postcards. What you can say is only you've established your bona fides up front in the title page. I've been collecting this stuff avidly for 30 years. You can say in your synopsis, my collection of this material is 3,000 cards. So you know your material, you know your subject, and you can say only one seen by exhibitor. If the judges believe you, if they don't, they're not very nice people. They're cynics.
So I think I sort of have an answer for the next one. We'll ask nevertheless. TCV cards with stamps used on the picture side. Let's assume I want to talk about this nice bridge, and the stamps really do not hide the bridge in any way. Is it a no-no? Is it an unwanted? And I guess the same applies for Maxim cards as well. Only Maxim cards are later.
Yeah, of course, Maxim cards, I mean, that's in North America, that's illustrated mail, and it's a totally different beast. You'd better have a stamp on the front of the picture postcard side, or it's not a Maxi card. But in the case of what you're talking, again, first of all, a judge is not going to have time to look at every card on 5 frames or 10 frames of an exhibit. If it serves, again, in my mind, if it serves a purpose, and see, I need to use that card to make a point, and it's the only one I've got, I'm going to use it. If it doesn't destroy the image of why that card is on the page, then pays your money, takes your chances, lose a condition point. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, but I think there are areas in an exhibit that are much more important in my mind that you can really get hammered on, and that's treatment. And that's also your deltiological knowledge and subject knowledge and how it's portrayed. Rarity and condition, those are fairly subjective things that we can deal with. But if you mess up treatment or you don't tell us what you know, that's where you're going to be hammered, in my opinion.
And the last one I have is postal stationaries. So this is a postal stationery. From the front, it looks like a picture postcard. We all know it's a postal stationery. And really, I can't really understand why not. I mean, why should I care if it was issued privately or by government? I mean, it shows a picture.
Well, I'll flip that around on you. Thematic exhibiting, which you are quite accomplished at. If you throw a private picture postcard in that thematic exhibit, what do you think's going to happen?
I know exactly what's going to happen.
You betcha. So when you say, what's the difference? I'm not going to say if you put in a picture postcard, because the photograph is the only one that you've seen that makes a point in your story, and it happens to be a governmental issue or a PTPO, if it's one, I don't think you're going to get whacked. But again, the point of a picture postcard exhibit is to display the publisher's art. And there should be enough stuff out there that you shouldn't have to use a government card. That's just a personal opinion. And again, if you've got 1 in 5 frames, who's going to note? If they see it, they'll probably write it down on your exhibit evaluation form and say, try and replace the government card. But I'll bet you probably didn't get any dings on your points. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, I think that was actually a very good answer for me, because I think you made a very good point, the difference between them. So these were my questions, and it's about time I let others voice their questions. So anyone? Okay, David Matlow wants to have a question, so go ahead, David.
Hi, I found this fascinating. I've been a stamp collector for many years, but have been too intimidated to ever exhibit any of it. My question, and maybe a very basic question, is the choice between philatelic and picture postcards binary? Because in my collection, I have a series of postcards on specific events. It's the Zionist Congresses. These were meetings held annually or biannually between 1897 and 1946. Each Congress had special postcards and special postmarks. And how might one best exhibit that? Because it's both sides of the cards that tell the story.
Well, absolutely. And that I've been criticized a lot. In fact, I've been beaten up a lot over my career as a purveyor of rules and exhibiting and judging in North America. Not so much the last 5 years, I've kind of pulled back, but I believe that an individual should exhibit whatever he wants to, use whatever he wants to, and call it whatever he wants to. Now, people have called me an anarchist, a bomb thrower. But if you make the point of your story is to talk about these congresses and these events, and these were the things, it would be like if you did, VIPA. The Viennese Philatelic Congresses produced a gazillion tons of things for those stamp shows. Are you going to tell me, well, you've got Cinderella's in it, it's got to be shown in Cinderella. Oh no, you've got Illustrated Mail in it. You've got advertising covers. It's got to be shown in Illustrated Mail. Or you've got traditional aspects, or you got postal history aspects, or you got display, you got stuff, you got tickets. No, it's an exhibit about an event that has to do with philately, and I'm going to show you all aspects of it. And whether it's a picture postcard produced by the individuals that were holding the event, or postmarks, or Cinderella, or labels, whatever it is, I think that that makes a wonderful and interesting exhibit that will have a great appeal to the viewing audience. And if you discuss on the title page and synopsis what it is you're trying to do, defend what it is you're trying to do, the jury should accept your premise, as long as you do a good job. This is what I'm going to do, and I do a good job. The jury, I don't want to say must, but the jury should accept what it is you're trying to do and judge you accordingly. This is what I want to do. How well did I do it? That's like any exhibit. I'm going to show you the development of rates from 1872 to 1891 from Schmangortny to Bezort. And if you don't do a good job, I don't care how important the subject is, you're not going to do well. So that's my opinion. And I have met resistance in my life.
Thank
from
you.
conservative traditions. Yeah. But I would encourage you, and particularly being a northern neighbor, that you should do what you want to do, and you show it down here and even in Canada. There's good, some good judges up there. You
Thank
get the right jury, you'll do well.
Anyone else? So there's a question by, oh, Moshe, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, team. Thank you very much for your exhibit, for your talk. Can you emphasize a little more about what kind of information you expect as a judge to hear from me about the postcard, about the background of the printers and the designers and the photographers? And do you want to hear about their biography, about the name of their cat, about from when to when they dealt with postcard? I'm familiar with what the expectation is about philatelic knowledge. I'm sorry to say that I'm still a great novice about what should I say about the postcard. I saw in one of your pictures you showed, in one of your slides, there were a lot of blue marks, remarks about picture number, this and this and this. Why? This is, say, it's written on the postcard itself. Why write it in a very flashy blue? So I need a little more experience, which I don't have, and I hope to have yours, about what should I write there?
You know, probably 50% of a picture postcards that you have in your collection, there's nothing to say about it. Sometimes you don't even know who the printers are. Photographers, unless it's stated, and unless you know a lot about a particular company, you may not know who the photographer was. So much of this is just totally unknown and unavailable. And yet, if you can look up, thank God for Google at all, you can start going into the archives and find out who these publishers really were back in 1898 or 1912, and you can find out a story about them. As an example, we have in our illustrated mail class, we have first day covers. And of course, the object of this is to take a stamp, first day of issue, and then people design cachets. Well, there's a story, and of course, that's the focus. The focus is kind of on the stamp and the first day postmark, but it's also on the cachet and the cachet makers. Well, you're expected to come up with lots of information about the first cachet this guy made, what was he doing, how long did he produce things, what was the printing methods. That is a lot more available information than it is in postcards. Postcards, we're kind of expected to know the printing method. That's one thing you should probably include. And I'll be honest with you, in my exhibit, which is on the web under the AAPE exhibits page, I didn't say color type, this type, that type, that type. A lot of people do. Certainly Sage has, and one of your exhibits on the sepulcher on the mount. That exhibit has a lot of information about the printers and the publishers. The more you show throughout the exhibit, not duplicating, but the more knowledge you show, the more points you're going to get for deltological knowledge, and that's worth half your 35 points. It's worth 18 points. And okay, like the exhibit numbers that I had down, the card numbers, that showed information that this particular publisher had taken photographs of Bloemfontein and published 41 different views. Is it important? No. Does it show that I did some personal study or research, or from the knowledge of the cards I have, that's what I know about these guys? You're trying to create something out of whole cloth, because deltiology is such a new thing and is so poorly researched, and quite frankly, virtually all of the data, I mean, it's gone. It's like South African TB seals. I mean, all that stuff is gone. You can't go to the archives because the archives have been destroyed. They're gone. So it's the same thing with deltiology. So anything you can scrape together and put down for judges to say, oh, this guy has done some work. He's looked into this and he's looked into that, and he's using his personal experience. That's a long way around not telling you and answering your question. But I think the more information that is not known and would not be known by either the casual exhibitor or even the judge that you can show indicates that you have done as much research as can be expected as an exhibitor. I don't know if there are other judges out there who would like to come in, but that's my opinion. I like to see that somebody has gone more than just, here is this postcard and everything that he says is visible on the face of the postcard. I want to know more. I want to know when it was done, a little more about the publishers and printers and photographers, if you can find out.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I say that was a mouthful of marbles for a response, but hopefully it gave you a few ideas. The more you show, the more they think you know something, and that's important.
I deal with most of the cards I show. It's about the Holy Land, the different aspects of the Holy Land. The exhibit I showed in the last two exhibits was about the Holy Sepulchre and about the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And fortunately, this area of knowledge, it's more researched during the years, so it's not easy, but it's relatively more there's more possibilities to find the knowledge about the people who dealt with those pictures in Israel or back then Palestine or under Turkish Empire and in Europe, because there were more people researched the Holy Land and the different aspects. So it's there. And the dilemma is how deep should I go about just writing, as I said, the name of the cat of the publisher. Of course, this is not what I'm going to write over there, but there is a lot of information I have. And I don't want to flash my knowledge and just put whatever I can and write a lot of long talks about the people who made the pictures. But again, where is the line, which I don't know? I'll find out. That's okay. I understood your answer, and I learned along the way.
Yeah, and yours is one on display here online, right?
Yes, this is one under the name of Kobi Alexander. I'm the curator of the Alexander collection, and I'm using the very nice material in this collection to make the exhibition. I
looked at this morning, I looked at your exhibit, and I will tell you that I was very impressed. You have a lot of information. You show a lot of personal study and research, and you show a lot of information. You have great knowledge, and it's well displayed. I mean, every time that publisher comes up, you don't want to duplicate that information, but when it's there, I mean, in the frame and a half I looked at this morning that I had time, it was very well done. And I don't know how well you've done. I don't know what your past scores are or anything else, but I would think you would rate very high on both subject and deltiological knowledge. That's my personal opinion. So that very well done. It's a beautiful
you.
exhibit.
Okay, there's a question by Michael Smith, which he sent by text, and maybe he would like to ask it himself. Michael?
Yeah. Hi, Tim. It was really around stationary cards with hand-drawn pictures on, is whether they can be considered to be picture postcards.
You know, that's an interesting question. And of course, in the Boer War, there are an awful lot of those created, in prison camp, et cetera, et cetera. And I would count them as illustrated mail on a card. And again, if it had to do with the subject that you were trying to develop, I think they would be very appropriate. And probably good on the challenge factor as well. Particularly if this guy that was the artist has a story behind.
Excellent.
Would it be? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, people, you were talking about describing printing methods and stuff about the cards. A postcard collector here, he told me there are quite a lot of good books that are around people who collect prints. And he pointed me at a book that helps you identify the different techniques that are used to produce the cards. So it's aimed at people who collect prints, but it's by a chap called Bamber Gascoigne, and I think it's called Identifying Prints. And it's quite a useful book to sort of try and understand what techniques have been used.
Okay. And what was his name?
He's a guy called Bamber Gascoigne. If you know about the UK, he's the guy who used to do University Challenged. He was a TV presenter. But
okay, well that's good. There are a lot of books that deal with printing, but when you get right down to the nitty gritty, particularly in our part of the world, there ain't a lot.
No.
But I like that comment about the hand-drawn caricatures and things. Some of them were printed, but some were actually ink drawings, and they're remarkable artifacts.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, anyone else? No, well, at this point, I would like to thank Jim. Let's see if I can do this. Probably not, it's not working. Anyway, yes, we can all do that. Half of the people here are
Thank you
here,
very much.
so you can't hear them, but we all applaud you. So thank you, team, for your presentation. It was really great, and I think we all know a lot more about exhibiting picture postcards than we did beforehand. So thank you, and good evening, good morning all.
Yeah, and we hope that you will enjoy.
Thank you.
That you prepare.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for your attention. And it's always fun. And meet some new faces and even some people that I know by name but didn't even know. So very good. Hopefully one of these days I can come out your ways for a stamp show.
Amen. Amen to that. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Andres.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll talk